hello everyone. This is the last day of term and the last, so the number 7 in my series of lectures on elements of academic English and academic writing. And the focus today is on flow and how we achieve flow in a longer piece of writing, like an essay or any other kind of assignment. This session won't really be, there'll be no real focus on paragraph level writing, and there's plenty of other things that you can do in relation to sentence level writing and paragraphs and achieving a flow within a paragraph, but we've got other workshops for that, and there'll be other materials that I'll post online. But also, once we get down to kind of paragraph and sentence level writing, I think it becomes much more specific to what an individual is writing about. So I'm not trying to address too much of that here. Now, in previous sessions, one other thing is there is a Google document. I won't be asking you to write anything into the Google document this week, but it is at least a way of me putting certain things in in there and sharing them with you. It will basically be a kind of a reference point for this session. So if there's any questions that come up, I can always throw things into the Google document afterwards. So the QR code on the screen right now is a link to that document. And just for the convenience of the people in the room, I'm just pasting it into the chat as well. But there's no need to follow that link just yet. Okay, so in previous sessions, building up to this, we've talked about plagiarism and academic integrity, and then last week we looked at synthesis. And I think a really important message to take away from kind of a combination of the last two sessions is the idea of maybe academic writing from sources being like honest use of ingredients in your cooking. And I've mentioned this before if you've been in those sessions. But yeah, I really like this metaphor that comes from Williams and Carroll, who kind of suggest that writing well at university is about, doing some reading, selecting the sources that are relevant to your answer, and then it's what you do with those sources, the way that you put your readings together and the ideas you got from your readings together, that allows you to be the architect of your writing. In the same way that going to a supermarket, choosing ingredients and then preparing those ingredients and cooking them enables you to be the chef or the cook who creates a dish. And so basically good academic writing is like, you can buy your ingredients, you prepare them, and then you can present your pie to your friends and family and say, this is mine, I made this for you. And the opposite of that is when you go to the supermarket, you buy the pie as a ready meal, you heat it up, you serve it to your friends and family, and you say, I made this pie for you, because that's cheating. Okay, so that was our kind of like basic position on plagiarism and what plagiarism is. And then last week we kind of looked at the element of synthesis in writing, which is about gathering those ingredients of what we're going to write about, and then starting to turn them, treating those ingredients in a way that starts to make them into a dish that we can enjoy. And so what we did last week is we did an exercise where I asked you in groups to kind of brainstorm ideas about whether or not the University of Hertfordshire was a good place to be a student. And then we looked for themes within your brainstorm, and we started to separate them out into something called a synthesis table, which we're going to see again in a moment. But the synthesis table and the session on synthesis was all about trying to give you techniques to go from reading to putting ideas together from your reading together into into an order that will make sense and make it easier for you to progress to the next stage of your writing. Because I think a really typical challenge that students face when they first start writing from sources is they end up just kind of like summarizing one text at a time. This author says this author says that, and then this author says something else. And that tends to lead to quite descriptive writing. It tends to be very difficult to turn that into a good answer to a question. And what a lot of students find, especially when you're doing something like a dissertation and writing a literature review, is it's very difficult to write concisely like that. You tend to write more words than you would like. Okay, so we've moved from talking about plagiarism to talking about synthesis. So what's bad and what's good, and kind of that leads us on to today's session, which is about moving from synthesis to structure. So the image on the right of the screen is just an example of a piece of student writing. But how do we go from a table of ideas that we've organized the way we did last week and turn that into a structured essay? Now, a question for you as a starting point. I hope you can you see the words on my screen? Yes, thank you, Samantha. What did these words and expressions do? In case you can't see them there. Even though, in addition, ultimately, for example, however, to begin, in conclusion, what do these kind of words and expressions do for us?
I think they are summarizing, and they are like thing like a paraphrasing something that we have understood and read.
Okay.
They might be as a connecting link between.
Yeah, in most cases they are kind of connectors, and this kind of language tends to get called kind of they're linking words or linking expressions. There you go. There you go. Just as I was saying, it's like having subtitles. The very moment I said the words linking words, Oyan Kintola wrote linking words into the chat. Yeah, but okay, so these are linking words, and what do? They link. Now, I have to. Feel free to tell me if you think like linking words have a kind of a use or a purpose that hasn't been mentioned yet.
So yeah.
So Samantha?
Do they make the words like the essay more interesting, like the sentences? Do they make it like more interesting and kind of going into your point? No, making it more interesting.
They might do. They might do. Yeah. And I don't know if someone else was about to speak at the same time. Thank you, Samantha. Ian Consola is adding extra words like so and as well. Sonayan, what would you like to say?
It helped the flow of the essay.
Okay. Now, if you've been to my sessions before, you know it's always like dangerous to answer my questions, because usually I'm trying to trick you into saying something, right? And I think that's what I've done, and I apologize for that. So I have to confess that, like, as someone who reads a lot of student writing, linking words are my pet hate. And as someone who teaches about academic writing, linking words are one of my pet hates. And I think they kind of get overemphasized, and they tend to get all grouped together. That's kind of why I put them in a word cloud, as if they're all part of the same thing. But these different words all actually have different meanings and different purposes. And I just got this list of words from a pretty good source, which was a Future Learn course on academic writing. So like Future Learn courses tend to be pretty good online courses. Sunil Kumar is now saying they're used to support our argument or why we are saying what we are saying. To an extent, yeah. But like as I'm saying, these words came from a decent source, and yet they included "in case of." I mean, I struggle to think of a time when it's going to be useful to write "in case of" in a university essay, right? If you're walking around a university and there's a fire, you might see a box on the wall, a little kind of glass box, and it says "in case of fire, break glass." That's how, when I say "in case of," take an umbrella in case of rain. It's a bit of a ropey expression, that, but I'm not sure I see "in case of" as a useful phrase when writing. I think part of the problem with linking expressions is that for people in my profession who might like write books on academic writing and how to write, and for people kind of like teaching workshops and saying, okay, I've quickly got to give you something that's going to improve your writing, it can be quite easy to kind of like teach you some words and say, okay, use those in your writing and it will improve your writing. But I'm going to argue that like it's not quite so simple, and if only it was. And also sometimes because these words have very specific meanings, if we don't teach or if we don't understand the specific meanings and uses, we can make our writing worse by choosing the wrong word or using it inappropriately. So like moreover is like, I was telling some students yesterday, moreover is like one of the words I hate most. I love language, but I hate moreover, because moreover, it means this next point I'm going to make is more important than the last point I made. And yet most times I see it in writing, I think students just don't want to say "and." So they've said "and," they've said "in addition," then they've said "furthermore," and they're looking for one more word. Oh, I'll say "moreover." So sometimes I think we want to have a bit of variety in our writing, and we kind of mix up the linking words a bit, but that can send people in the wrong direction. It can give the wrong message. So yeah, I'm really sorry, but my starting point was to ask you about linking words, and then probably to try to tell you that I think you're wrong. So this is what I want to say, and I'm saying this in relation to like keywords today: flow, direction, and signposting. Now, Samantha says linking words can make your writing more interesting, and I think I don't actually disagree, like if they're used correctly. Sonayon said linking words can help give your writing flow, and that's the thing I want to disagree with. I want to tell you, like, you're better than your linking words. Linking words are not the thing that makes your writing flow. The words don't make your writing flow. You make your writing flow, and a process you go through in putting things together as you're writing, that's what dictates the flow. The linking words can be important and they can be very useful, but only as signposts that can show the reader the direction of the flow of your writing. Okay, it's not the linking words that provide the structure or the organization. Thank you, Sonayan. I'm certainly not trying to pick on you. I knew that someone would say that linking words, make our writing flow, or they make it coherent or whatever. I would argue they don't. You've got to do much more work and much more interesting things to make your writing flow. When you've got a sense of organization and direction, then you can use the linking words to show the reader that direction, and then they become really valuable. And as Samantha says, they can make your writing more interesting. And as Sono Kumar says, yeah, they can highlight important things and help you to explain and give evidence, but not just if we throw them in. If we write something that isn't very well organized and doesn't flow, putting some linking words in there is only going to make things worse. And if we use the wrong linking words, it's like when a signpost is kind of, when some kids at night, I think it's quite funny to move the signpost around. So if you use a however instead of a furthermore, or use a moreover instead of in addition, then it's like moving a signpost so that it's sending the reader in a slightly different direction to what's actually there. Okay, so I'll try to make this all a bit more meaningful. Okay. Quite a few of my images just come from me in PowerPoint searching for an online image that I can use. So I wanted a nice image because I don't know much about geography. I don't know if you do. But I know that rivers usually start somewhere in mountains with just a little bit of water, and then they flow. The water flows down the mountains into the rivers and out to the sea. So I just want to establish that the source of the flow of your writing is your thinking, and we can channel that flow. We can channel your thinking by looking at connections, categories, and labels. And if you do this kind of thinking before you start writing, it's going to make everything else much easier. Okay. And we actually started to do this last week when we were synthesizing from brainstorming or from reading into kind of a set of ideas. We looked for connections between the points that different people made in the brainstorm. We categorized them. So we made connections, we developed categories, and then a really important step, we gave them labels. Okay, so the labels that we came up with last week when we were trying to discuss the question of, is the University of Hertfordshire a good place to study? Of course, the answer is yes, but we answered that question basically by identifying that we wanted to discuss staff, teaching, facilities, and community. And as I hope you'll see later, once we've got like a 1 or 2 word phrase to label our themes and categories, it's going to make it much easier to write about. This also kind of helps clarify things for ourselves. If you can't label the themes that you're reading about or you're writing about, you just need to spend more time thinking and maybe reading. But the good news is that usually other people have done that thinking, and you know, the key words that you see when you're reading for your subjects, well, those are the labels that you're probably going to use in your own writing. All right, maybe something quite fun. We've got decent numbers now, so it's the last day of term, and I'd like you to have a social experience as well. So I'm going to send you to a breakout room in a moment, and I will copy this image into the Google document. So if you need to consult the Google document, I've just put a link into the chat. But you could also take a screenshot of what's on the screen now, or take a photo of it. What you see are 16 boxes, and each box contains a word. Now, this is actually taken from a TV game show. It's not a typical TV game show because it's quite intellectual and it's really difficult to do. So it's a TV quiz called Only Connect, and in Only Connect, the contestants work in teams, and they're given a grid like this, and the task is to make connections between the words in the boxes and identify 4 separate categories, and then to label the 4 separate categories. So for those of us working in universities and thinking about academic writing, it's an absolute gift. A colleague that I used to work with way back in when I worked at the University of Essex, a guy called Desmond Thomas, has written a book on writing for PhD students, and he's a huge advocate of just playing Only Connect, just for kind of mental training. Okay, if I see a bunch of words, how can I make connections between them? How can I see the patterns, make connections, form categories, and then give those labels? Because that is such an important process in thinking about our reading and thinking about information before writing. So let's do one of these together. Can anyone see? Can anyone see 2 words that are connected? And this isn't a trick this time. So Sonia, and if you don't, please feel free to start trusting me now. If you can tell me 2 words that you think are connected, tell me what the words are.
Shepherd and
Dash
farmer.
and comma.
Okay, Samantha said
Shepherd and farmer.
shepherd and farmer. And sorry, I don't know who else spoke there. Was it Sonia?
Dash and comma. Dash
And
and
you've got
comma.
dash and comma. Brilliant. Okay, we'll come back to both of those. So Samantha, you've got shepherd and farmer because they are both what?
To agriculture.
Yeah, so they're kind of like things related to agriculture. Do you see anything else that's related to shepherd and farmer? Anyone? Got shepherd, farmer,
Veterinarian and zookeeper.
veterinarian and zookeeper. So fantastic. Okay, so as a group we found the first category. We've got 4 words that are connected: shepherd, farmer, veterinarian, zookeeper. What's the shortest, what's the most concise label we could give to that? What do we call those 4? You know, what is the connection between those 4?
Employment.
Yeah, okay, so that's true. Was that Damika?
Yeah.
Hi, Damika.
Hi.
So absolutely, employment would be a label here, but I think it's more, it's a decent label, but I think we can be more specific.
Professions?
Okay, what's special about these professions? Like,
they are connected with ecology, or
yeah, could you be more specific than ecology?
Agriculture and
Is a zookeeper?
zookeeper.
Environment?
Environment, more specific than an environment? Zookeeper, farmer, shepherd, veterinarian.
Nature?
Yeah, okay. I think, you know, if we had a 3-word label, it might be work with animals. Animals? Would that be fair? Like when you said employment, you know, if I added teacher to that, you'd probably say, no, teacher doesn't fit in that category. But a label, yeah, maybe it's not so difficult. Maybe it's not so easy to label that category, but it's, you know, people who work with animals, you know. Animal employment, is that possible? Now, before Sonal Kumar gives all of the answers in the chat, I'm sending you off to breakout rooms. Whoever you're working with, whoever you find in the breakout room, obviously talk to each other, introduce yourselves. And can you identify the 3 other categories? You identify 3 more categories, put them into a group of 4, and give them a label. Okay, and I'll send you to the rooms now. Welcome back, everyone. Does anyone think that they've got 4 clear categories with 4 words in each category?
Yeah.
Who said yes? Matthew?
Sunil.
Oh, Sunil.
Yeah, we found them all, I think.
Okay, do you want to give me 4 labels?
Yeah, so gallop, bound, race, and dash.
Okay, are all?
They're all a movement or activity, physical activity.
Okay.
And the other ones are dog breeds, so like spaniel, retriever, which one else? Hound. Yeah.
Terrier.
And other group is to do with the language. So
okay.
Ellipsis, comma.
So that table is dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
So we've got comma, ellipsis,
hyphen,
and what else?
Dash.
Well,
sprint will go along with the race, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. So these are the answers.
Okay.
That usually there's this ward perhaps isn't quite so tricky, but often there are kind of multiple tricks in the puzzle. Oh, sorry, am I sharing? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually there are multiple tricks, but here basically dash could be a kind of running and it could be a kind of punctuation, but by process of elimination we put it into the punctuation category. But yeah, so working with animals, dogs, punctuation, and types of running or running, even movement. Actually, there's no kind of right or wrong answers with the labels. The more specific you can be, the better. But obviously, you don't want to be so specific that it excludes some elements of the category. So the idea of agriculture, for example, seemed a good one because farmers and shepherds, that's definitely agricultural. Veterinarians are often agricultural, but zookeepers are not. So it needed to be a bit broader than agricultural, but we were able to make it more specific than just nature or environment or ecology. So we have to do a little bit of work to get the right label and to feel happy with the label. But once we've got the label, we can start discussing things much more clearly, right? Because if we're writing about 16 different topics or 16 different themes in one piece of work, you can imagine it's going to be quite messy. If we organize them into four categories of ideas, 4 themes, and we give the themes labels, that's going to be very easy. That's going to make it much easier for us to write about those in an organized and clear way. And it's also going to make it easier for us to signpost. Now, I think it's this game, Only Connect, in the Google document, I put a link to Only Connect, the TV show, and a website where you can kind of practice this kind of puzzle. I think as a mental exercise, it's a really good thing for us to do, and it translates very well into an important stage in the writing process. But of course, it's not the same as starting in the library with 16 books or 16 journal articles and having to deal with that. So just to take you through an example there. So last week, I introduced a kind of some extracts from literature on the causes and potential kind of solutions to plagiarism among students at university. And last week I suggested this kind of essay question, which was what are the causes of plagiarism among university students, and in what ways can these causes be addressed? Okay. And then last week we did a kind of a synthesis task around extracting details that could help us answer those questions from multiple sources and put them into a table that would help us to kind of organize our reading. Now, in the Google document, I've put like a full kind of solution to that task where I've written everything in my own words, but taken the key points from the extracts. So if you're interested in kind of retracing the steps behind what's on the screen now and what I'll show you later, it started with 7 or 8 different sources and me trying to identify the points within those sources where they're talking either about causes of plagiarism or ways that we can address plagiarism. And so then I kind of, you'll notice that in the notes that I make, I'm always connecting my notes with the source. So I've got referencing even in my notes. So because it would be terrible if I'm writing an essay about plagiarism and I end up plagiarizing my, myself because I lose track of where I took various bits of information. So I'm keeping references next to the ideas that I found at all times. I'll give you a moment if you want to kind of read what's on the screen. But yeah, I found like one author, Jude Carroll, saying the causes of plagiarism are poor time management, a lack of genuine interest in studying, external pressures like pressures from parents, a lack of understanding of UK educational culture, which includes students saying they don't understand what an academic offence is, or they come from a culture where they really want to show deference and respect to experts. So they kind of feel like, oh, if I use the experts' words, then it's more respectful to them, without realizing that in UK higher education, that's considered less respectful. Then we've got Batane in 2010, who did a study where the results are quite brutal, really. They kind of found that the causes of plagiarism weren't a kind of a lack of awareness, but actually a lack of care and like laziness, not working hard, and actually just students deliberately cheating and not having not being responsible, not being ethical, not really caring, and that becoming quite a normal thing. Selemani et al. More recently, their work kind of concludes that students, the biggest problem is students don't know what plagiarism is, but also that students aren't necessarily that good at writing, but don't realize that they're not so good at writing. So they don't realize that they're plagiarizing, and they think they're not plagiarizing, but they are. And then going way back to 1996, this is someone that I referenced in the lecture on plagiarism, Alistair Pennycook, making the point that some students have been trained to kind of memorize and reproduce what they've read, but they haven't been trained to write from sources using their own words, and that what's been valued in their previous education is kind of the opposite of what's been asked in the UK. So we've got lots of stuff here that I took from my reading, but if I put it out in a synthesis table, I've divided my synthesis table up so that I can put it all on one slide. But if I divide things up in a synthesis table, I can kind of look down the causes of plagiarism, and just like we did when finding categories from this puzzle, I want to try to make connections between these points and maybe see if I can identify 3 or 4 categories, and then to give them labels. And where I went with this is, I thought that in the reading there were basically 3 causes. Cause number 1 is that some students lack familiarity with UK academic culture. Cause number 2 is that some students lack sufficient skills to tackle university assignments properly. And cause number 3 is that some students lack a genuine interest in studying or in behaving ethically as students. And all of the stuff that I read, I felt I could put it into one of these 3 causes. But of course, in order to make this work, I found my 3 connections. I would recommend that you do the same if you can. I made a point of trying to write the causes as full sentences, because I think if I can write them as full sentences, it helps me to be confident that I am expressing exactly what the connection is between those 3 things, and I can play with my sentences until I'm happy that they're as precise as I need them to be. Another advantage, if I'm writing in full sentences now, I can later use these full sentences in my writing. This could potentially be, at least part of a topic sentence of a paragraph. I'm not going to talk about paragraphs today, but the importance of having a sentence within a paragraph that says clearly what the paragraph is about, that really helps the reader, and it really helps your writing. So if we're writing sentences at this stage, they're going to be useful to us later on. And what I found when I was writing these sentences, I realized I could use a similar structure for each one, that it was about what students are considered to be lacking. That seemed to be the theme. So yeah, I thought, oh, that's an opportunity. If I can use the same verb, they lack this, they lack that, and they lack the third thing, that will also help me develop patterns in my writing later on. But of course, what I need for each of these three courses is a label for each one, because I want to be able to refer to my themes in, you know, in simple and clear terms. Does anyone have any suggestions how I could label any of these three courses? Don't worry if you don't.
Course 1, ignorance.
Ignorance. Okay, so would that be number 1? Ignorance. Okay. Now, and Matthew, were you making a suggestion, or is it just? No.
I'm trying to find another one, but I.
Okay, no problem. So possibly ignorance.
Course 3, cheating.
Yeah, Davika, no, I like this, but you know, because you know, writing is all about, you know,
Different, yeah.
us and the way we're conceptualizing this. So it's absolutely right that your labels will reflect something of your perspective. Because for me, as someone who does my job,
Yeah.
your words seem really harsh. Oh, ignorant.
Yeah, I know. You to be more
Ignorance.
professional. Yeah.
I mean, Damika, you're basically saying that students are ignorant cheats, right?
Number 1 is ignorance.
And obviously, I could never say that in my job. Miriam saying, yeah, maybe number 3 could be disinterest. I think, yeah, disinterest is quite nice. And I think what Miriam has done there, or naivety is a nice, or is like a more positive version of ignorance, isn't it? Thank you, Sunil. Damika, we're gonna see you as the harsh voice in here, the strict person. Miriam suggesting inadequacy for number 2. So I think Miriam is kind of joining Damika, because if we said ignorance, inadequacy, and cheating, those would be 3 quite negative words. So we need to consider whether those words and their connotations really reflect what we want to say. But yeah, I'm going to say time and time again that there are no right or wrong answers here, because it's your conceptualization of the ideas that you meet within your field. You'll probably have, I expect you'd have a better sense of the right terms than someone from outside of your field, and this is the kind of thing you can talk to your fellow students about, you can talk to tutors about, but also you can see what kind of themes, what kind of language is used in the literature in the field. Because actually, if you read within the field of education or linguistics, which is where I've got these texts from, the word cheating is used, but I think the word ignorance isn't. And I just think that it's because of negative connotations around ignorance. But also naivety is a much more positive word, but we don't tend to see the word naivety as well, but maybe something to do with awareness or lack of awareness. Just to point out, Miriam suggested that for course number 3, we could call this disinterest. And I think that works very well. And I think it also suggests a nice strategy for us, that once we've written out a long sentence to express what we mean, we could try to identify what's the key word in that sentence, in our opinion, and could we turn that word into a label. So students lack genuine interest. If interest is the most important word in the sentence for us, then disinterest would be a very sensible way to label that. So perhaps, how about cause number 1? Any suggestion as to like what word might be most important in cause 1? Some students lack familiarity with UK academic culture.
Mark, can you repeat what you just said? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure, Samantha. What I said was cause number 3. Miriam came up with a label disinterest based on the idea that the word interest in that sentence is very important. So in cause number 1, some students lack familiarity with UK academic culture. What word or words do you think are most important there? Because maybe we could use that as a label.
Would you say disengaging for cause 1? Would you say?
Disengaging. I mean, I think maybe cause 3 is more about like a lack of engagement, a lack of.
Yeah, I think cause 3, yeah.
But no, like take one of the words rather than trying to, rather than doing like extra work and trying to think of synonyms or anything like that. Is there one word in
Hi, unfamiliar, Mark.
Unfamiliar. Okay. So I think familiarity and lack of familiarity, unfamiliar is, yeah, I think that could work. For me, I think there's one word in there that might be more useful to me in labeling. Miriam suggesting academic culture. Sunil?
Can we say in positively manner, like not in negative word, but label can say engagement, like
engagement.
Engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we can start to do things like say it's an issue, it's an engagement issue, it's a matter of engagement, and we can talk about when we talk about solutions, we can then also use the same word potentially. Yeah, but anyway, I think what I'm suggesting here is a thinking process, and whatever thinking process when you're working by yourself on an assignment, it's between you and your thinking process, right? I'll show you my thinking process for these 3. My labels would be culture, skills, and ethics, because yes, familiarity is an important word in cause 1, just like lack is important in all 3. So I can write about it's about lacks, but I've got to be specific about what is lacking. And yeah, they might be lacking familiarity with culture, but in 2, they're kind of lacking familiarity with writing conventions as well. So perhaps with cause 1, I can just talk about the cultural aspects of this. Cause 2, I can talk about skills and abilities, and cause 3, I can talk about the ethics of it all, like whether it's good behavior or bad behavior. But actually, I think if we spent long enough talking about this, I think you could probably persuade me that I could rewrite that sentence and make it more about engagement. If I go back to the literature and think about where my essay might go, then maybe engagement is a useful term then. But once I've got my labels, I can now start to write in terms of, okay, there are three causes: culture, that relate to culture, skills, and ethics. And suddenly I've written a signposting sentence that summarizes what the 3 causes are, and then I can start writing about the 3 causes. So once I've got these labels, there's things that I can do in my writing that helps it to flow, helps the reader to see my organization and my thinking. And if I've got a 1-word label, and in this case I've got nouns, culture, skills, ethics, I've got adjectives related to these. So like in the chat, Samantha had suggested for cause 3, it could be unethically. Yeah, so I can if I'm writing about ethics, then the adjective ethical is going to be useful. So like ethical issues or ethical concerns, or unethical behavior, or behaving ethically and unethically, as Samantha suggested. So I'll start to see that I have some flexibility in what I can say, what I can write. And just so that you can see, my 3 causes here on the screen, the text that was in my table earlier, because when I was taking notes on my reading, I was largely trying to write everything in my own words but reference it. If I move this stuff around now, I think you can start to see a plan forming. For each of my causes here, I've got a sentence which expresses the cause, and then I've got my details from my reading, and they're referenced as well. So it kind of helps explain what we mean in terms of lack of familiarity with UK academic culture. And then going back to those reporting words at the start of the session, just to show you, actually, you know, those the reporting language. Sorry, I say reporting verbs. We didn't talk about reporting verbs. The linking expressions. See, I hate linking expressions so much. I don't even like to use the word. But our linking expressions, often they're expressing and or but. So if I put a little bit of that into my plan as well, I can give myself a sense of direction of where I'm going with this, because my thinking about my reading is that when I see these claims about students not having the skills to tackle their assignments appropriately, I accept all of that, but I think Jude Carroll's point that underneath all that, it's often like poor time management. Poor time management can be the thing that doesn't give students enough time to write appropriately. So they might know, or they might be able to do it if they give more time to it. So I want to kind of just separate out that point about time management and maybe leave it until last. So it's important not to ignore that. And when the authors that I've read are kind of being quite critical of students because they're irresponsible, unethical, they cheat, as Damika says, or that they're not really interested in studying. Jude Carroll also makes the point that there's lots of there's external pressure on students. So there are students who are sent to university and are expected to do well or expected to study a subject that they're not really interested in because of family or because of cultural influences. And maybe it's a combination of those things that lead to the students studying on degree programs that they're not really interested in. And perhaps it's no wonder that, you know, to use your language, they're not engaged or they're disinterested and they end up behaving unethically. Okay, so that was just kind of one half of my essay here, how I went from reading to note-taking, categorizing, labeling, and I've got kind of the framework for some synthesized paragraphs, which you can see that each of my paragraphs is going to refer to at least 2 sources. I like to think here I'm on my way to producing a good piece of writing. Okay, and I hope it didn't look too difficult. Right? It's just some steps that we were following. I'm not going to show you in the Google document. You'll be able to trace, I think, my steps. But basically, when I look at the literature on solutions to plagiarism, I can come up with 3 solutions from my reading. There's a lot of authors suggest things like provide training in good academic practice, teach students how to write from sources and teach them how to reference, but also like to have policies for cheating and how to detect it, like using things like Turnitin and punishing it. So being kind of consistent so that any student who plagiarizes, for example, would receive the same kind of punishment and treatment according to what they'd done, rather than like having some courses where the lecturer says like, okay, I don't care, I'll let that one pass, and so on. Okay, so again, I've gone through a process. I've written this in sentence form, and I've given labels, cultural guidance, skills training, and punishment. And perhaps I can even connect up, well, culture and cultural guidance, skills and skills training, ethics and punishment. Now, kind of, we don't have a lot of time today, but hopefully you can start to see how you might take these points and start to organize them into a discussion to create an essay that answers my question about why do students plagiarize and how can the causes of plagiarism be addressed. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but when you're looking at my, I've potentially got six main points here, 3 causes and 3 solutions. What would you do? Would you write the causes first and the solutions second, or is there another way to do it?
Mark, sorry, I got to join another lecture now.
No problem, Damika. This is being recorded, and there's probably just just 10 more minutes, so you'll be able to watch the end.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Take care, Damika. Any thoughts on how we might organize this into a longer piece of writing? Would you put the causes first and the solutions second, or is there another way to do it?
Should we begin with the introduction?
Oh, sure. I'll come to that in a moment. But just in terms of the order that we would put these into an essay.
All right. If I may suggest, I would suggest a cause and a solution in each paragraph. Yeah. So when you are done with the cause, you put the solution before going to the next cause.
Yeah, I mean, and it's possible, Matthew, that we might be talking about 1 paragraph, we might be talking about like 3 paragraphs. Depends on how much we have to say. But yeah, if we think about if we think about our essay having kind of sections and each section being a combination of paragraphs, you're quite right. We could have a section on culture with cause and then solution. We could have a section on skills with the cause and the solution, and we could have a section on ethics and then punishment and link those together, like punishment as the way to deal with ethics. Or we might find that there's another solution that we think can deal with ethics. And yeah, as I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It absolutely, it kind of depends on, well, it depends on something I'll say in a moment. But yes, we could do our causes first and then our solutions, or we could group them together and say, here's a cause and here are the solutions to it. And I think much depends on whether you think there might be one solution that tackles multiple causes, or whether if we could neatly say every cause has a separate solution, then it would make a lot of sense to do what you're suggesting. But if in our reading and our thinking about this, we might think that, well, I might want to might want to introduce an argument along the lines of, well, punishment is important, but punishment can help students to learn and to take it seriously, but without the guidance and the training, then the punishment, is kind of unfair. So, because the students who lack familiarity with UK academic culture are going to be punished for their lack of familiarity, and maybe it's the university's responsibility to try to give them that familiarity. So for me personally, if I was writing this essay, I would probably put the causes first and the solutions second, so that I can also be analytical about whether the solutions will successfully address all of the causes kind of fairly and effectively or not. But that would depend on me. Now, so no, you said, well, shouldn't we have an introduction? And absolutely. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by saying essays have an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion, because I think everybody knows that. But so we know that on paper, or on our screens, the work that we submit is going to have an introduction at the beginning. It's going to have an ending, which will be a conclusion. It will have a main body. None of you are going to plagiarize, so all of you will have a reference list at the end of your work. That's how it's going to appear on the paper. But what do you start writing first? You can tell me your answers either in what you normally do or what you think you should do. Feel free to shout out or feel free to type into the chat. What do you start writing first? Sunil says, begin with what this essay is about. Okay. So the introduction. How about the rest of you? In the last assignment that you wrote, what part of your assignment did you write first? Or maybe you're too smart and you know this might be a trick question.
If I may say, it's just to introduce your work to the examiner, as the case may be, just to give a, shall I say, a summary of what you intend to address in your essay.
Yeah, no, so I'm not asking what is an introduction, but I'm saying what's the first thing that you write when you're writing an assignment? Like chronologically, when you sit down and start writing an assignment, or when you're working on an assignment, what's the first thing that you write with? Miriam says main body first. And I've seen Miriam's writing, and I can assure you Miriam is a very good writer. So okay, here's my suggestions, which you might find controversial, but I don't think they are. In my experience, a lot of students, when they write essays, they start by writing their introductions and they end by writing their reference lists. And I would be surprised if most of you didn't write your reference list. That's the last thing that you write in an assignment. But I've said this before, but I would suggest that you can start writing your reference list as soon as you start reading for the assignment. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense to wait until you've written the whole assignment and then to write a reference list, because you don't know, you might be writing right up until the deadline. You might be 1 hour from the deadline and then you've given yourself an hour to write your reference list. And you know you're going to make some mistakes. You know you'll end up making mistakes with your reference list, either the formatting or you'll miss something out. Because when you're working under time pressure, you know, we all make mistakes under time pressure. And there'll be something that we can't find, and there'll be something that we've forgotten. But if when I've kind of been trying to show you that, you know, when I did my reading, I was referencing my notes on my reading. And when I started to put together a plan, I was referencing my plan. So all of that time that I'm planning, I can have a Word document with a reference list in it, and I can start building those up. And I can keep track of what I'm reading. I won't lose anything. If I later think, oh my God, where did I see that thing? And oh, I know it was this author, but now I can't find the text. We've all experienced that, so we want to try to avoid it. And if we start our reference list while we're reading, we're going to give ourselves time to get it right. We'll increase the chances that that we'll get our in-text citations right, and we won't give ourselves a massive job to do, an extra job to do at the end of the, once we finish writing our assignment, we should be able to say, okay, I've finished now. We can save a lot of time actually by doing the reference list as we do our reading. And there's a question, so is it Akindele? You have your hand up. Hello, Akindele?
It is a mistake, sorry. It was a mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Yes. Okay, so I hope you think that's practical advice, because I'm intending this as practical advice. I think you might be surprised by my next suggestion, which is, I think, like, if you don't know where your essay is heading, how good is it going to be? Now, a conclusion to an assignment, a conclusion to an essay will be your kind of final chance to answer the assignment question. Okay, I'm not suggesting that you write your final conclusion before you write anything else, but I suggest you try to write a sentence, and it might be flexible because it might change as you do more reading and you do more thinking. As you write your main body, that will also be part of your thinking process, and it might lead you to a different conclusion. But before you start putting together your plan, think about what your conclusion is going to be. I'm going to give you two examples of this in a moment, but think about what you think your conclusion is going to be. Try to write it in a sentence. This sentence that expresses your conclusion, a sentence that expresses the main point of a piece of writing, is called a thesis statement. And I'm suggesting that you have a working reference list, that means a reference list in progress, and a working thesis statement. That means you write a thesis statement that you can change over time if you want to, and if you change your mind. But you're working towards it. And I think there's people in the room who will be starting work on dissertation soon. When you write a dissertation, it will be the first time for most people that they also have to write an abstract. Now, most people wait until they've finished all of their writing before they write their abstract, but it can be a really good practice for you to write a working abstract. So you try to summarize in a short piece of writing everything that you're going to do. And you know that you can change it in the process of writing, but it gives you a way to kind of conceptualize and focus on kind of where your work is going. So I think begin to write your conclusion as soon as you know what you think your answer to the question is going to be. And I would always say, like Miriam, try to write your main body before you write your introduction. I'll explain why in a moment. If you're smart, and you are all smart, you can even start writing elements of your main body while you're reading. Okay, you'll turn them into paragraphs later, but if we go back to, here's my reading notes, and already I'm writing some sentences here that you might find them in my final draft. And when I write my causes, as I think I said, I think I'm writing already the topic sentences for paragraphs. So even as I'm reading, I'm producing some work that I can use in my main body, and it's actually going to speed up my writing. It's going to save me some time. If I do the thinking early on and clarify my thoughts, it will save me time later. Students I work with who spend the most time on writing are often the ones who are not writing very well. They're kind of writing something and then having to start again, and then having to start again because they haven't spent enough time kind of thinking and reading before they start writing. So once you've written a main body, you can then write your introduction. An introduction usually includes a thesis statement. So if you followed that advice, then you've already done something towards your introduction early on. But whenever a student starts an essay by writing their introduction, I always say, like, how can you introduce something if you don't know what it is? Sometimes you might have a guest lecturer come to speak to you at university, and a lecturer from Hertfordshire will introduce the guests, and they'll tell you something about their career and something about their work, something about what they're going to say. They can't possibly do that if they don't know who the person is. If I ask you to come and introduce a stranger to a large audience, you won't be able to do it because you don't know who that person is. In the same way, I'm not sure how you can introduce an essay without knowing what the main body is. I think, Sunil, you were maybe talking about something else though when you were talking about, introducing the topic and establishing what it is. So I'll address that in a moment before we go. So yeah, I'm suggesting that if we start by getting an idea of our conclusion, the conclusion is going to influence the structure of the main body. And if the conclusion is consistent with the main body, then we're going to achieve a sense of flow. So for example, I think if my conclusion is this: the most effective way to deal with plagiarism is to punish students for their laziness and lack of integrity, then I think it makes sense for me to start off by writing about, well, some students plagiarize because of culture. Some students plagiarize because of a lack of or a lack of cultural awareness. Some students plagiarize because of a lack of skills. But actually, the research that the most recent research is suggesting that the most common cause of plagiarism is a lack of ethical behavior that is rooted in a lack of genuine interest. And if I'm going, because a typical kind of Western rhetoric is to build up towards the most important point. So if I'm leaning towards that conclusion, then I need to talk about ethics and punishment towards the end of my essay so that there's a sense that my argument is flowing towards that conclusion. But notice the change. If my conclusion is this: the most effective way to deal with plagiarism is to teach students not only how to write for university. Sorry, I saw a spelling mistake and I can't stand it. It's my fault. Bear with me. There you go. If this is my conclusion, and actually this is more my position, my genuine position, the most effective way to deal with plagiarism is to teach students not only how to write for university, but to understand the culture that underpins writing in UK higher education. If that's my conclusion, then my position really is that punishment isn't the answer. So actually, I want to deal with the issue of ethics and lack of interest and punishment at the beginning and get it out of the way. Say some people think this, but actually the bigger issue is a kind of a lack of awareness and a lack of skills, and we need to train students how to write. But it's not just about the mechanical writing and how to reference. It's also like why we reference and what's the culture behind that. So notice that with one conclusion, I'm numbering my clauses and I'm going from culture to skills to ethics. With this conclusion, I want to move from ethics to skills to culture, because that's where I want to end. And this is why I'm saying knowing what your conclusion is a really important aspect of planning what the order of points you make in your main body. So, but we'll come back in a moment to how that all fits together. But basically, the introduction should introduce the main body, and the introduction should signpost that we're heading to a particular conclusion. And then we're going to organize the main body so that it does lead to that conclusion. And just like something quick to say about introductions, and I think this is quite straightforward, and I believe that you can see this in anything that you read, whether it's a short essay with one introductory paragraph or it is a first thing on my desk. If I pick up a book this thick, the introduction will be a chapter. Yeah, a short essay, the introduction will be 1 paragraph. Some essays might have an introduction that's 3 paragraphs. When you write a dissertation, your introduction might be about 1,000 words even. Or you could take a book like this and the introduction will be a chapter. But either way, a good introduction will always do 3 things. The first thing it will do is it will establish the importance of the topic. And that's in terms of, I think this is relating to what Sunil was saying. It will establish why it's worth writing about and why it's worth reading. And often in academic writing, we do that by problematizing. That means we establish that there's a problem in a field. There's some stuff that we know, but there's some stuff that we don't know, or there's an issue in the real world and we have to try to find a way to deal with it. So often we try to identify a problem with our topic, and because if there's no problem, then why are we bothering to write about it? Why are we bothering to read about it? At some point in an introduction, we'll normally see a statement, which is the thesis statement, which is usually the most important point that the writer is going to make in their whole work. But it will also show us where everything is going. It's like, you know, it's not a good way to tell a story if you give the audience the ending before you begin. But in academic writing, it's a really helpful way of writing, because it becomes part of the guidance that you give your reader. So I'm going to take you to this destination, and this is how I'm going to take you there. So the other thing that we see in a good introduction is an outline of the structure of the essay, or the structure of the text that's going to follow. And remember, if we're talking about if we've identified 3 themes or 6 themes that we're going to write about in an essay, if we have labeled those themes, it becomes much easier to do the signposting. So, you know, this essay will discuss the lack of skills, the lack of cultural awareness, and in some cases, the lack of engagement that leads students to plagiarize. Look at that. In one sentence, I've summarized the 3 themes that I'm going to discuss in my essay. And I could do that because I gave them labels and you helped me with that. And so this is my last slide. By doing all of this, we make flow possible. So it's not the signposting language. It's not the linking expressions, and it's not the signposting language that creates the flow. It's all the thinking that's gone into organizing the content before we start writing. Right? We have a main body that is structured in a way that is leading towards the conclusion, and it might take some twists and turns along the way, but it will lead to the conclusion. The introduction tells the reader what the conclusion is going to be, and it introduces the main body. And like that, we achieve a sense of flow. What we do at sentence level and paragraph level to signpost the direction of the flow is something that we can deal with kind of on a more personal level and individually with tutorials, with questions. And I'll put some stuff online after Easter about how you can do things like that and work through some examples yourself. But it typically works much better when it's your own assignments and your own writing that we're focusing on. Okay, thank you very much everyone for your attention. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point?